Michelle. So a little bit about Julie, who is going to be our speaker today. So Julie Piet Cassidy, I remember the first time I met her when she attended actually one of our live PowerBrews here, and I sensed her high energy and her friendly demeanor. And she's actually here to talk to us about mindfulness, as we know. She's a certified life coach and specializes in the area of law of attraction. And many of us have heard a lot about that, not quite sure what it is, but she's actually going to help us navigate that topic today, learn more about it, and hopefully apply it to our lives. So without any further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Julie to the PowerBrew. Here we go.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Ian, who's quietly working in the background for us. We're going to see, I suppose I need to, what am I doing? How do I show my webcam? I guess I have to do this, and then this, and then magically I appear. Here I am. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Now I've got to just get myself situated. I'm so happy you're here joining us today. Talking about mindfulness and the law of attraction is one of the things that I truly love, and I just know that all of my joys and all of my trials in my past have led me to this place. And so I am thrilled and thankful to Carroll Community College and Advantage C and this beautiful group of people for inviting me here to be on this webinar so that it's easily accessible. We had about 60 people register for this, and that's very exciting. What that tells me is that it validates what I believe to be true. People are hungry for information on how to feel better, whether it be, and I saw from some of the answers in the poll questions, you know, whether it's to feel that sense of empowerment, or if it's an idea of how to streamline your thoughts and maybe remove some of the distractions from multitasking and those types of things. I want you to also know that I did, if you submitted a question when you registered, I have those and they are printed out, and we will be addressing, actually some of those questions were very insightful, and we will be addressing them through the content today. But at the end, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers. And if we haven't addressed something and it's really on your mind and your heart to ask, please, I suggest that you type in the question and we will be sure to address it either today within the constraints of our time, or I will be happy to contact you afterwards and make sure I get you the information that you're requiring. So without further ado, let's get moving on. Mindfulness obviously caught your attention and brought you here today. Some of you have experience with it and some of you do not. And there is some confusion about what mindfulness is and what it is not. So I want to make sure that our polling questions yet. I want to make sure that you understand the vision I had coming to this webinar, and that is to help you tap into your own power. The work that I do is not at all about telling people how they need to behave. The work that I do is guiding people to their own empowerment. I thoroughly believe that everything that you need is within inside of you, and that that nothing in you is broken, that everything is just as it needs to be. And it's just a matter of just guiding and expanding and growing. So as we move through this, just please keep that in mind. So mindfulness, you can think about mindfulness in several different ways. And I do want to clear up one thing, and it actually was a question. People consider mindfulness and they also consider meditation. My perspective is that meditation is one of the tools that allows you better access to great mindfulness. So, and we can talk about that a little bit more, but I wanted to clear that up. Today, we're going to focus on two areas of mindfulness. One is that you absolutely have a choice when you decide what it is that you will focus on, what thoughts you're allowing to stay uppermost in your mind. And I use my hands a lot. This should be interesting. So we'll see if I can stay inside the frame. Also, we're going to be talking about mindfulness from the perspective of clearing the excess that's going through your mind at any given moment. And we'll move on to that as the second part of this webinar. I always like to start from the very basics. When we come into this world, assuming that you are a healthy baby, you are born and you are absolutely in a state of pure joy and well-being. As long as your needs are taken care of and you're fed and you're dry and you're warm, you are happy. You're a happy baby. And over time, that changes. But I wanted to remind you that that's really how you came into this world. You're happy. Think about a baby, rolling around on their back, grabbing their feet, and cooing and eyeing and making lots of beautiful noises. I like that as an image to sort of take me back to what it is that my soul really believes is its birthright. So that's where we want to sort of focus on as we journey towards the idea of mindfulness, and it is getting back to that very pure state. And really, if you think about what life is meant to be, stop for just a minute and think about that. What is life supposed to be? Do you believe that life is supposed to be this crazy struggle, this always trying to get ahead, always being better than the person next to you? I don't think so. But what is it supposed to be? Well, I have an answer for you. The purpose of life is joy. The basis of life is freedom. And the result of life is growth. It's really quite that simple. And that's the track on which we should be walking, running, or jogging through life. It should not feel like it's a challenge. It should not feel like a struggle. And in fact, those are flags that something needs to be adjusted. So if you start to feel those feelings, again, time to return to mindfulness and check it out and see what's happening. Let's take a minute now and talk about what happens over time. I hope you like my image of crusty. I like to think, and I've got to put the clicker down for just a minute because I need both hands. So over time, we start out in that beautiful, clean, pure sense of well-being. But over time, we have experiences. What happens during those experiences? We do have some good experiences, and I don't want to just put them to the side and forget about them. Absolutely. But for some reason, and I think you might agree that this is true, something happens where our negative experiences in our lives tend to take a deeper, stronger grip on us than the positive experiences. Unless you're one of those really blessed people who just always has been glass half full, and that's where you choose to stay. But over time, for instance, if you were a child and you were running around your house and maybe your mother and father were having a conversation and you were sort of running in and out of the room in which they were speaking, someone may have shouted at you and said, "Keep it down, quiet it down, stop running around, go to your room." And all of a sudden, that beautiful light that you were running around having a great time, just being that sense of joy, joy parade, storming all around the house, all of a sudden your light got extinguished. And maybe you felt guilty or shameful because mom and dad weren't happy with you. So that's a little example. But as we go on in time, maybe somebody breaks up with us, someone who we were really in love with breaks up with us, and that leaves a mark. And then we go to work and we're in our career, and maybe we're, cut down in a conference room in front of a bunch of other people. Maybe we think we have a great idea to share. We share the great idea that comes from our the core of who we are, and we share it in an earnest way, only to be shot down in front of a group of our peers. Geez, that's going to leave a mark, right? So all of these things over time just build up over us, and I call it the crust, okay? And sometimes we hear about it peeling back the onion. You can think of it that way too. But I think of it as crust because it comes when you start to do the work, it actually breaks off in chunks, and different parts of yourself getting back to that sense of joy and well-being start to be revealed. As that happens, you become lighter and you feel more empowered and you're able to move through life a little more joyfully. And it sort of incrementally over time, you can continue to chip away at the crust that's built up. So if we can keep in mind that we've got that crusty exterior now built up around us, right? What is that crust? We talked about it a little bit. in that it happened through our experience. But let's take a look at it in a little bit of a different way, more of a physical way, or more of a spiritual way, sorry. So why do we forget our joy? We forget our joy because those crusty experiences that we've had have created beliefs and programming. So now our beautiful minds that were clean and pure, they are now covered up and crusty with, I like to say, lies. Did we really need to slow down and stop running around the room and be quiet? Well, yes, but that was because that was of a need of our mom or dad. And it wasn't anything that we needed. I don't want to go too deep in that. But basically, over time, if that happened, now you may be thinking, well, I don't want to make too much noise. I don't want to run around the room too much, or I don't want to be too spastic or something like that, right? You start to put little labels on yourself, and those labels really change who you're meant to be. So if you believe that you were misbehaving, or if you believe that your idea in that meeting was not worthy of mention, it can really shift the way that you feel. And over time, you start telling yourself lies, or these lies just exist. And that will impact how you move forward and what your expectations are and what you believe you deserve. And also challenges how you feel about your worthiness as a human being. So as we develop lies, and I'm going to just put an example out there and weigh in here if you'd like, or raise your hand and show us that you feel this is true. So how many people take a look at a situation that's coming up? Or maybe you put a phone call into a friend, let's just say, and you called them over the weekend, and today's Tuesday. You still haven't heard back. How many of you start to make up stories? Or I'm getting some hands raised in the room. But how many people start to try to figure out what's happening? Well, why hasn't she called me back? What in the world's going on? Is she mad at me? Did I say something to her that upset her? You know what? The fact of the matter is you can use all the time and the energy that you have to figure out things like that, the great mysteries of life. Why hasn't she called me back? Why hasn't my boss given me that promotion? Why can't I win the lottery? Why aren't I getting a raise? You can ask yourself and create stories about those different subject matters in your life. The fact of the matter is you just need more information, right? I suggest that when you start telling yourself stories, you stop the recording and you just take a deep breath and you tap into your mindfulness tools, which we're going to get to. But stop telling yourself the lies and the rhetoric that have absolutely no foundation. And when you start to make up these stories, it's a signal to yourself to stop and get more information about whatever the scenario is that you're trying to work out. I hope that makes sense. I like to think about this state of this sort of, that our culture, our society finds ourselves, in this weird behavior, and that is that we are so busy and so distracted and so overwhelmed, and our minds are so full, we really are sleepwalking through our days. It's like this dreamlike state. And I remember reading this in Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. It's a great book. If you haven't checked it out, you might want to check it out. But sleepwalking. I mean, think about your days. How many times have you driven from point A to point B and do not remember the trip at all? What is it that you were doing in your car? It's sort of terrifying if you think about it. Were you present? Do you remember the road? Do you remember seeing the cars around you and in front of you, behind you? Was it snowing? Was it sunny? How long did it take you to get to where you were going? Were you listening to the radio? Were you on a phone call? We're so busy doing everything in addition to the task at hand that we really do become sort of numb to life. And don't beat yourself up if you're one of those people. I have to catch myself doing it every day. The idea here is you're just going to notice it, right? Okay, now I'm teasing. these are starting to be the parts about mindfulness that really, it's where the rubber hits the road, if you will. Oh, okay, we've got a hand raised. Do we know who it is? I'm hoping that the hand raised.
Tell them to type in the question.
Oh, if you have a question and your hand is raised, please go ahead and type it in the chat box. I'm thinking maybe the hand was raised because you were one of those people who could identify with what I was saying. So thank you for that. So I want to go back to, we were talking about sleepwalking. So what can you do about it? Well, let's get into the real meat of the matter with mindfulness. The first step is becoming the observer of your thoughts. And this is really the key element in mindfulness. The idea of, remember your mom used to go, what were you thinking? Well, if someone asked me those questions today, I'd have to really just pause and stop and think about it. What are you thinking? Do you know at any given time what in the world's happening up here? Or is all this just really a bunch of activity going on and you're just plowing through your day? When we start to notice what it is that we're thinking about, it's a little upsetting. And I have a great statistic, and Jill's going to appreciate this because she saw me speak on mindfulness before, and this was something that stuck out to her. I heard a statistic, and that statistic says that we have, on average, 60,000 thoughts a day. So when I think 60,000 people, the first thing I think, 60,000 thoughts, the first thing I do is come up with an analogy because I need to get an image for myself. I'm a visual person. So if you think about Camden Yards, if you've ever been to an Orioles game, we're here in Maryland, or Raven Stadium. Camden Yards is about what capacity, 45,000 or so? I think the Raven Stadium holds maybe, somebody probably out there probably knows, maybe it's 60 or 70,000. But think about that. If every one of the seats in a stadium is a thought that you have in any given 24-hour period, first of all, isn't that overwhelming? That's a lot of thinking. What if you could understand that on average, 80% of those thoughts are negative thoughts? That's extremely depressing if you ask me. What if we could just shift that balance just a little bit? Wouldn't it change the way you feel? You know, if you're one of those members of that statistic, imagine if you could decrease that. And let's just say instead of 80%, what if 40% or 50% were negative? If it was an even split, right? Immediately you would start to feel better about yourself, about your life, and about your future. So let's start to carve away, and I'm sure maybe that analogy has got you considering what it is that you're thinking of maybe right now that you would consider to be a negative thought. The rule of the game, too, is as you become an observer, you have to practice these rules. No judgment, ever. Stop judging yourself. Just like you don't like other people judging you, do not judge yourself. And be patient as you learn these new skills. Okay? So as you become the observer of your own thoughts, you're going to notice what it is that you don't like. Those things that frustrate you, those things that anger you, or those things that make you sad and depressed. So those are the thoughts that I want you to be able to identify most clearly, at least initially. Okay? So when we talk about negative thoughts, the word contrast is used. And contrast is anything that gives you a thought that makes you feel badly. So think about it. We have a thought, that thought drums up emotions, right? It's all related. They talk about the mind-body connection. Your ego, your brain, your mental capacity absolutely impacts the way that you feel, okay? So when you have a lot of anguish going on mentally, physically, it manifests and you feel that. And I always draw sort of around in this heart and gut area. And if you think about it, it causes you dis-ease, right? It makes you uneasy when you have bad feelings coming from bad thoughts. So follow the string here. Dis-ease, disease. If you do not get active in mindfulness and you allow these negative thoughts to take hold in your body, I believe that will lead and manifest into some type of physical disability or disease. It's got to go somewhere. It's got to do something. So here's what I suggest. Let's get really keyed in on what it is that we dislike, what causes us dis-ease here in our physical body, and let's start the job, the work of clearing this stuff out. So let's start with contrast. It's anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, angry, at disease, right, with disease, and any resistance. So if it doesn't feel easy and smooth, then it's probably something that needs to be worked out. When you feel that, I call it the red flag, come up, and you have a negative thought and you feel it in your body, that's your time to go, oh, what's happening here? Stop for a moment, take a deep breath. And this is where we start to weave in tools for mindfulness and tools to support your better, happier, joyful mind and body. So I like to say pause and pivot. And pause and pivot allows you to stop the motion, stop this revving up, this train, runaway train you've got going on with your thoughts and your feelings. And it allows you to make a choice to pivot to a better feeling thought. Did you hear what I said? Better feeling thought. Not just a better idea or a better thought, but a better feeling one. I want you to be able to have it happen up here in the mind, but also to feel better in your body. The better you feel, the healthier you will remain over time. So now, if we can shift to a better feeling thought, that is what we categorize as clarity. Okay, so you have contrast, bad, clarity, good. So clarity is when you are in that state of being able to see clearly and feel better. I hope that makes sense. I know if we have questions come up, Michelle's going to wave me down. Before we get on to the exercise that helps us examine the contrast and the clarity, I want to just take a minute here. Here's my friend Einstein. What a genius, right? Why does what we are thinking matter so much? Well, we already talked about the idea of dis-ease, and we talked about the idea of physical manifestation of negative thinking, right? So that's really, really important. But let's take it a step further. And this is going to take us on a journey outside of our bodies. If you understand that everything in the universe is energy, right? It's scientific. The table in front of me, the computer, the chair I'm sitting in, all physical. I mean, all, that's really good, are all energy. Our bodies are made up of energy, okay? The earth is all energy. So energy is always vibrating, it's always moving. And with those movements come a frequency. Those frequencies are transmitted out into the universe and they attract back in similar frequencies or matching frequencies. So stay with me here for just a minute, and I hope I don't lose anybody here. But you can look this up too. It's called the Universal Law of Attraction. And this law says that what you focus on, you draw to you. So if you are focusing on negative thinking, bad feeling thoughts, you don't feel well, you're putting out a frequency to the universe and beyond, and eventually, it takes time, you will attract back into your life similar experiences. So if that is true, then it also makes sense that if I'm moving about day to day in a state of joy and well-being, that is the frequency I'm putting out. And by the law of attraction, then I must be drawing back experiences that match that frequency. So what if it's that simple? I believe that it is. And now that you have that information, I trust that you won't ignore it. The law of attraction works just like gravity. And I want to ask you this question. When you get up in the morning, do you think about gravity? As you're going through your day, arriving at the office or school, are you thinking about gravity? And when you go to bed at night, have you thought about it all day? I say no, you probably haven't, but you know that your feet stayed on the ground all day, didn't it? Didn't they? Gravity works whether we give it any thought or not. And I want to say to you that the law of attraction is always working whether you pay attention to it or not. And I suggest you begin to pay attention to it, because what if you don't pay attention to it and you just let those negative thoughts, that runaway train, just keep on going down the track? Well, then all of that energy is going out as a frequency, and if those negative thoughts get out there, they're going to attach to negative experiences, and those will show up in your life. We all have that person in our existence, in our experience, our human experience. That person we know, maybe they're at work, maybe they're at school, maybe they're in your family, and they are always in a state of gloom and doom. I call them the Eeyore personality. That Eeyore personality that just sort of gets through the day, right? They get through the day, always seem to be complaining. Things are always happening to them, sort of a victim mentality. And when I notice those people, first of all, I do what I can to not be in their circumference of influence, because I really like to think of putting myself in a protective bubble as much as I can. But you will notice those folks, if they are the victim and they believe that to be true, they will continue to be the victim. There will always be this energy that swirls into their experience that sort of keeps them down. And it saddens me, because I really believe that with some self-examination and with some becoming the observer, and maybe with a little guidance from someone like myself, they could maybe be guided out of that sort of circular life experience and move on to better days. That's why we're here to do this work. It's very important. So become your own champion and decide now to attract those things into your experience that align with what it is that you want in this life. So now I'm going to take you through an exercise. This is just one tool. And this webinar really is, it sort of started at 30,000 feet high, right? Looking way far away, zoomed out, looking in at mindfulness. Now we're going to go through an exercise. And I want you to understand that this is sort of the beginning. And this exercise is meant to be a tool for you that's easily accessible. You can do it in your mind, but I suggest you grab a piece of paper. And I'm going to take you through clarity through contrast. And what this means is, I want you just for a minute, we're going to walk through this. I want you just for a minute, carve out this space and take a look at those things that you do not want in your life. Now, based on what I just said about 2 slides ago, you're going to go, I don't want to think about the negative stuff. I would rather think positive things, because if I'm thinking about the negative things, well, my goodness, then they're going to keep coming into my experience. It's okay. Bear with me for a second. We're only going to think about negative things momentarily, and then we're going to talk about the positive side of those same experiences. Okay? So take a piece of paper, and you can see I've given you an example of how to split up your piece of paper. And if you don't have paper and pen handy, that's fine. You can do it in your mind. All right? So I want you to come up with, I don't know, 2 or 3 things just off the top of your head. What is it that you don't like? What really gets under your skin? And I want you to write those things down in the contrast column. I'm tempted here to go into the Jeopardy theme song, but I don't have the rights to it, so I'm not going to start singing to you. I'm just going to go quiet for just a moment. I hope you were able to come up with a few things. Sometimes when we're under pressure, it becomes very difficult to come up with things. But I bet given a quiet moment later in the day, if you couldn't think of anything right now, you'll go, oh yeah, I know what really gets under my skin, and you'll be able to come back to this exercise. Okay, so let's just take whatever is first on your list. And I have lots of examples that I tend to use, but I'm going to use this one for right now. Now, I'm really simplifying. I hate cold pizza. I'm going to use that as my example, okay? Now, chances are you may have a superficial sort of thing like I hate cold pizza on your list, but chances are you probably have some pretty meaningful, deep ideas of what it is that you don't like in your life experience, okay? So I'm not making light of those. I'm just using an example to move us through the exercise. I hate cold pizza. All right, that's my contrasting thought. Now I'm going over to the clarity side. And what I want to do there is I want to come up with something, a statement that counteracts that negative feeling. Now, here are the rules about creating your clarity statement. I want it to be present tense. Don't use negative words. Don't would be a negative word. Don't do that. And make sure it's something that makes you feel good. I don't want you to have any, what I call piggyback thoughts about it. So I hate cold pizza is my contrast. My clarity would be, you know, I really enjoy warm, delicious, fresh pizza. I am not saying anything about what it is I don't want. I am just simply deciding, well, I know I don't want that. What do I want? I really like fresh, yummy, hot pizza. Okay? So it's really that clean cut. Take what you don't want and then say, I don't like being around negative people. Okay, fine. Well, what do you prefer? I enjoy being around those people who have great energy and are positive in their thinking. So I hope that makes sense. And I hope that you're able to come up with your clarity statement. I'm going to give you just another 30 seconds to a minute to work on that. And then we'll come back to the next step in the exercise. And I'm catching up and reading questions while you do that. Okay, so I hope you were able to come up with a clarity statement. I hope you feel better about it now, because this is a very easy to use tool. You don't even need a piece of paper to do it, but it always helps. I think there's real cathartic energy that happens when you write things down. So now I want you to go back to your contrasting comment, your statement, I hate cold pizza, and I want you to cross it out. Because when you physically cross that out, you're sending a message to that thought that it's no longer needed. It doesn't support who you are or who you want to be, okay? It's no longer needed. Send it off with love. And I like to think about like putting it out for garbage pickup, right? Garbage pickup happens on Fridays. Well, let's put that out there with the trash that's going to be picked up. You never have to have that in your experience again. You can't see me, but I'm pushing it away. So that is clarity through contrast. And the idea is, please become really clear about what you're thinking when it comes to negative thoughts, right? Because oftentimes we're so bogged down with negative thinking and feeling overwhelmed and full in our heads that if someone says to you, if you had all the time and money in the world, what would you do? You can't even come up with one good thing that you would do. And why is that? Because 80% of your mind is cluttered with negative thinking and thoughts that don't serve who you are meant to be. So use this as a tool for yourself. I hope it's useful to you. I hope you feel the power in it. Dismiss those negative thoughts. But first, decide what it is that you do prefer to be happening. If there's somebody negative in your family and you have to run into them during the holidays, what do you prefer? I really enjoy spending the holiday with people who are, like I said before, energetic and positive in their thinking, okay? Another great phrase is, I love to be around people who are in alignment with all that I am and all that I hope to be, okay? That's a beautiful statement. And putting it out there to the universe is that law of attraction. You focus on those things that are under that clarity column, and that is what you're drawing into your experience. So I hope that makes sense. Should you have any questions at all, please go ahead and use the chat box. The second part of the mindfulness equation, and this is actually pretty fast to discuss. Doesn't take a lot of time here, and I'm checking the clock too. I want to keep everybody on schedule. So the second part of mindfulness for today's webinar is clearing space in your mind. You know, I hope those of you who did write in questions, and I was reviewing them, and what I noticed is there are people who are feeling overwhelmed, and people who multitask, and people looking for tools. Well, I've given you one tool, and here's another tool that's very easy to use. But let's just take a moment. I just want to pause for a second before we move forward on this slide. And I want to talk about multitasking. You know, we were discussing this earlier. Multitasking, you know, it used to be sort of something you bragged about. Oh, I'm a great multitasker. Oh, I can do 5 things all at the same time. Well, guess what? Nothing to brag about. In fact, anytime you find yourself multitasking, and I want to tell you, yours truly, this morning, cup of coffee, phone in hand, computer open, TV on. I didn't even know I was doing it. But then all of a sudden I went, what is this madness? What is this crazy? And I know I'm not alone. And I thought, well, what am I trying to achieve here? What's my goal right now? My goal was to sit down with a cup of coffee and enjoy it and experience it. Was I doing that? Heck no. I don't even know what it tasted like because I was so busy. So I stopped, put the phone down, shut the computer, turned the TV off, and I just sat for a moment. Well, what did I do right there? I started creating space. Creating space for what? For my mind to calm down and to decide what it is that I'd like to focus on in that moment, coffee in hand. I hope that makes sense to you. We have the power. We have the power to choose our thoughts. That's what that last exercise was for. And then we also have the power to create our environment to some extent. Now, when I'm home and everyone else has left the house and I can enjoy a cup of coffee, I'm in isolated space. So I have all the power to create that quiet experience. I recognize though that that's not always the case, and sometimes I have complete chaos swirling all around me. Now, how do you prepare for moments like that? So how do you get yourself through those moments of chaos when you can't really control unless you run out the front door and get into nature or something, and maybe you can do that. But how do you control and how do you protect yourself in those moments that are really beyond your control? Okay? So the idea here is that you sort of build in space in your mind so that you have room, I like to think of it as swing space, to take in all that extra that you didn't order and have a place to sort of compartmentalize it to the best of your ability. So by creating space, you create freedom. I love this picture so much. Thank you, Michelle, for finding this one. There is an exercise that you can do, and honestly, this happened, or this unfolded for me the other day. I was putting away clean laundry in my closet, and I had, thank goodness, I had a few extra hangers, but I found myself sort of doing that thing where you shove all your clothes to one side just to get in one thing that you need to hang up, a sweater or a dress or a pair of slacks, and putting my sweatshirts up top, and things were cascading down on me. So I had maybe 5 or 10 minutes of padding in my schedule that morning, and I said, that's it. I can't take it. And sometimes we get to that state where, you're just about to explode and you just need to do something at that moment. And that's what I did. But I suggest you build in this activity. Take 10 minutes and say, I'm going to find 5 or 6 pieces of clothing that I no longer wear, and I'm going to remove it from the closet, and I'm going to donate it or throw it away or burn it, whatever it's required to do, depending on the state of your clothing. And I'm going to make some space. And here's what happens. Just that little tiny shift, that 5 or 10 minutes of attention will create space. And then what happens? Next time you go to put clothes away, boom, there it is. Space is there. It's available to you, right? Also, when you go to think or look for something, that shirt you really want to wear, you can slide your clothes over and you can find that, pull it out of the closet, get dressed, and move on with your day. All right, you see the analogy here? How many times have you said, oh, I want to tell you about who I ran into the other day, and then you can't think of their name, or you can't find your keys. You're so overwhelmed that you can't complete a thought when you're talking to a friend or a colleague. This is when the analogy of the closet comes in. Think about your mind as a cluttered closet or junk drawer in your kitchen or basket by the front door. Go through your home a little at a time and get rid of the clutter. Trust me when I say a clutter-free home supports a clutter-free mind. They work hand in hand, because as you go through your house and your space and you're trying to get through your day, you're running into this clutter and it's jamming you up mentally and physically. Okay? So take a look at that in your own experience and see if that doesn't help support those feelings of being overwhelmed. We're trying to create space in your mind so that you don't feel scattered, you don't feel overwhelmed, or wet cotton balls is what I like to say. I want you to be able to feel free in your mind, to have the thought when you want to have it. Okay, we've covered quite a bit. We're going to get on to questions and answers here in just a minute, but I want to give you a lot of love right now. And that love is to say to you, if these ideas are brand new to you, please remember, become the observer. Do not judge yourself. Practice, practice, practice. Like any new habit. If you want to pick up running, you're not going to go out and run a marathon tomorrow. You're going to start incrementally, and you're going to practice, and you're going to build up, and you're going to create skills around the idea of running. You don't just run. You may weight train. You may do exercises, okay, to support that new exercise. That new habit. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to be gentle with yourself, lots of self-love, self-compassion, and no judgment whatsoever. The biggest message in mindfulness is this. And I had some questions that I saw, and I just loved them so much. So thank you, thank you. You know who you are. We talk about mental health in our culture, and we talk about having to do, we want to do better. There's a lot of pain out there, a lot of people suffering in our own community and in the world at large. So someone asked, well, what is it that we can do? Start with yourself, okay? When you begin to remove the crust and allow your light to shine, and you step into your truth of all that you're meant to be in this lifetime, what you do is you give yourself freedom, and you also have other people who are watching you, and they're watching you step into your truth. That frees them to step into their truth. And once that begins to happen, and we all put down these crazy barriers that have been built up because of the crustiness and the experiences, once you drop those barriers and become more fully yourself, other people will choose to do the same. And only then, as that ripples out, as Mother Teresa said, I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. I can only work here with myself. And this work will ripple out to others, just like this webinar. And I hope that helps. So I feel and I believe that this will impact mental health, my own mental health, and the mental health of those who are touched by this experience. So bear that in mind. I also got a question about burnout. And I don't know what field it was. They did not refer, but it says, what strategies do you have and or recommend to our field with such a high rate of burnout? strategies to avoid burnout. These strategies, I absolutely 100% believe that each one of us has the power to take a look at mindfulness and start to incorporate these exercises and many others. I mean, I literally have about 50 to 100 exercises I could pull out of my binder at home and work with people to help guide them into mindfulness. Just take time to yourself, and meditation is a beautiful tool. It helps us sort of sort our thoughts and quiet our minds, and it allows us to get back to that peaceful center that supports all of who we are. Those tools will guide you away from burnout. But what you will find is that you start to hear messages from inside that tell you what it is that you need in your mind and your body. But you must pay attention, okay? So I hope that that helps that question, and I hope that you find that the two tools that we've discussed today are just the beginning, like I said, and there's lots more to be done. And we can continue this work, and that's why we want you to be in touch with us, so that we can support your efforts, whether you're in human resources or an owner of a company and you want to bring these tools into your work, your team at work, or if you're an individual and you're just needing, some ideas and some guidance in your own life, we can support you in doing that. I want to open it up. Do we have any questions, additional questions? Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped right to questions. I always like to end my presentations with namaste, and I honor all of you who joined us today, and I thank you for your time. And now we're going to move on to questions.
So Julie, so one of the questions that has come up is just, can you talk a little bit about your career path to get to this place of being a certified life coach and becoming an expert in this area?
Absolutely. So that's a great question, and everybody's experience is different. But I don't keep it a secret. I'm 54 years old, and I'll be honest, I was in middle life going, is this it? Is this all I've got? So I think that was what generated some of the questions in my own mind, and I started to pay attention. And what happens when you start to pay attention is that you will, as I said, you will start to get messages about what it is that you need to do or what's next, okay? And those become sort of a tapping into the intuitive nature that we all have. We all have this voice inside of us, and I call it the gut instinct or your intuition. I was working a job, I was in sales, and what I recognized at some point was that the day-to-day activities of sales didn't resonate with me anymore. What I learned was I could be the best version of myself, but it didn't always equate to bigger and better sales. And for those of you who are in that field, you understand that sales is about the numbers, right? So it stopped resonating with me, and at some point when I was starting to feel that something wasn't right, I had one of those little messages that showed up in my life one day through an email from some mail list that I was on. Anyway, it was an offer to join a coach to become a life coach, a course in becoming a life coach. I didn't even think about it. I went, oh, that's what I need to do. I mean, it was that simple, and I didn't get up in my head about it. I moved from my heart and my gut, and I just knew that that was an answer, or at least it was a touchstone in my journey. So I signed up for the course. It was a 1-year course, and I was probably about 3 or 4 months in, learning lots of new information and skills. Some of that information I've shared with you here in this webinar. And I started to work on myself and take a look at what it is that I really desired. What was it that I did not like, and what did I prefer? I came up with a list. And as I developed that list, I noticed that it wasn't resonating with the work that I was involved with. And I went and talked to my superiors, and we hashed it out a little bit, and I just decided it was time for me to move on. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I had an idea. So that was sort of the pinnacle of my decision to leave a secure job and launch my own company so that I could help guide other people out of their own way. That was my theory. And here I am, not quite a year later, and I'm talking to you fine folks out there and having a blast doing what I love. And I hope that you feel my authentic nature coming through, because I really just do my best to just be who I really am and not put on any airs or phony personality or anything like that. But I must say, that's the last year of my life. This started probably back in 2006 when I saw the movie The Secret, and I started to get the idea about the law of attraction, and it planted a seed. And so things don't always show up immediately. We have to have patience and we have to have faith that things are unfolding as they need to, and we're really just all on a yellow brick road. So
Thank you for that.
sure.
And as we listen today, I think for me, I've heard so many different themes coming through, and the things that are really resonating for me are courage, self-awareness, optimism, and just being in touch with our surroundings. And as I think about that as employers and how we can create a culture and a workplace where those are the values that drive us,
Yeah.
that's something that really speaks to me. So just as we close out here, if you have further questions, I think that you can chime in at a later date and Julie can address those. Do we have some evaluation?
There'll be a survey that will come up after.
Okay, great. So there'll be a survey that will come up after this. And of course, we invite you to tune in again next month. I'll actually be speaking on the topic of,
We got a slide for that.
all right, how about that? Recruitment and retention. So that's been certainly my experience in my career, dealing with those two issues, and really all of us are thinking about, okay, first of all, how do we find the talent that's a good fit for our organization, and then maybe more importantly, how do we keep that talent engaged? How do we keep a meaningful and important message in our workplace to remain productive in this kind of ever-changing world? We never know what new technology is going to be tomorrow, and new challenges are going to face us tomorrow. So Julie, any closing thoughts for us?
I just really want everybody to remember to be gentle with yourself and continue on your path of looking into this idea of mindfulness, and remember the law of attraction, and do what you can to just find, even if people get overwhelmed with the idea of meditation, but if you can just take a few minutes, and I like to say set the timer on your phone for 2 or 3 minutes as you begin practicing meditation, and do what you can to kind of find the quiet spot inside of yourself and return home, if you will. And just thank you so much for tuning in. Lots of love.
Thanks so much. It's been our pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
See you next month.